What we're going to do is look at some of the configurations that are in the book. What are the basic ones that he already talked about? And on there, I'm just trying to do the ones. And this is the topology that you're going to use for your lab. And you're basically going to do the same thing that they did in here. So let's get out of this. Well, we're in the config mode, so we're okay, right? Config. And then we type VLAN. Question mark tells us a number. So what he's going to do, we're creating what VLAN 2, 3 is for. VLAN 2, and then name sales, and then VLAN 3, what's its name?
Marketing.
VLAN, can't type still. 4. And then we can do the do show VLAN, and we have our VLANs that we just created here. There's no ports assigned to them, but the VLANs now exist. And then he wants us to try, just to prove that we can't do it, for VLAN 4000, and it says we can't do that at the marker. And what it would normally say is you can't do this. You can't do this because we don't have extended VLANs configured, and we're not going to do that. Now then, did the show VLAN that he shows on page 473. Now, see, this is one where let me get out of here. Show interface trunks, and we don't have any trunk ports. Nothing shows up. And the reason nothing shows up is because we could show interface fast Ethernet 0/ I think 15 is one of them. Switchport. When we go into these things, it says that it's dynamic auto. And two autos, auto and auto, won't automatically connect things. I used to have automatic is not really the greatest thing in the world for a lot of stuff, because sometimes you wind up getting things done that you didn't really want done. But we can use the range command here because he shows in the book that they're desirable, right? They're not desirable. So we should be able to go into here and do a config T and interface range fast Ethernet 0/15 to 18, right? And now we have to, because what was the first thing we had to do? We do encapsulation, right?
Encapsulation.
So it was switchport, trunk, encapsulation, and then if we do the question mark, see, you got to give it to command, but there's only one available, .1Q. This is a layer 3 switch. There are other encapsulation protocols on it. So we can type the DO, and then we should be able to go into here and do switchport mode trunk. And now it's changed everything. If we move it around a little bit, everything went off and it's going to come back on as a trunk port. So now then,
15 to 18 trunks.
yep. We'll go look at that and see. Show interface trunk.
You don't have to name those, do you?
No, you do not have to name them.
Trunk, they're gonna...
As long as you, the numbers what's important. So now 15, 16, 17, and 18 are trunk ports. It's not going to get any better. Focusing on getting better.
The exercise we done the other night, you had to name fast Ethernet 15.
That was a description. That was to practice. And a lot of this stuff is to practice doing the commands and just seeing the things that you can do. That can be handy because if somebody comes in or you come in and you've got to troubleshoot something, the network administrator is sick, got hit by a bus, whatever. It's handy to know that, hey, that's the port that goes there. That's what we're having trouble with.
As long as that's sitting trunk, and it's going to bypass
Yep.
go through whichever one it needs anyway.
Yeah, well, all of them, remember, all of the VLANs go on the trunk ports.
Right.
All VLANs on the trunk port. So we just created these things. So based on what we think we've learned here, we should be able to go to this guy and he has 2 trunk ports. Why?
Which one?
I'm on switch 3 now.
Because he has to talk to the,
Because
switch at the top.
remember here, Fast Ethernet 01 is configured as auto. Auto to auto will not negotiate a trunk. We made the other end a trunk port, so I said, oh, I'll negotiate. And it is, see the mode here is auto. The encapsulation is 802.1Q. And the status is a trunk, and it's the native VLAN is 1 because we haven't changed anything. There's only one VLAN
So
right
that
now.
copies what it sees coming from the other end. And all
Well,
that.
it negotiates, it sees the other end. The other end says, I'm a trunk port. Want to be one? As long as it's configured as auto or desirable, it will automatically negotiate as a trunk port. So if we're going to go back, let's go back to, he goes back to switch 3 up here. All right, we'll go ahead and make it anyway. I forgot to put, looks like I forgot to put a guy on there, huh? Switch port 3, so we'll go to config T, interface, and we're going to do fast Ethernet 0/3. Switch port, question mark, a whole bunch of stuff in here. We did port security last time. That's one of the things that we could do in here. But what we want to do is mode, and then when we do this, we can make it dynamic. Actually, we could have made it dynamic, couldn't we? Or access or trunk. In this case, this is one that we're going to put a computer on, so it's going to be access. Switch port mode access. And then we're going to put it on VLAN 3, switch port access. And if we put the question mark here, it says VLAN, question mark, and then the number. So we're going to put it on VLAN 3. And then if we do a do show VLAN, and we go down here, Fast Ethernet 03 is now on VLAN 3. It's in, right now it's on its very own broadcast domain. Everything else is in a single broadcast domain VLAN 1. See, we already did the trunk port because he's got the next one. Even though he says it's there, he makes it a manual trunk anyway. So we did those, and we could if we wanted to. Let's see.
What's a manual trunk?
That's when you do the trunk command.
Oh.
Switch port mode trunk. Let's do that and get out of here. Show interface trunk. And you notice that, and he's got the we can do the ones allowed, that we have the VLAN allowed if we do a show interface trunk. And 1, 2, 3, 4, which are all of our VLANs, all the VLANs are allowed, and that's the default. So the next thing we could do is if we didn't want to allow them all, we could go to interface. We could go to config first, couldn't we? Interface, fast Ethernet 0. He only does one, so I'll just do that.
Just make a non-desirable.
So we're going to do switch port. Did I spell it right? No.
Numbers.
Switch port. I'm on fast Ethernet 015. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to do switch port, trunk, allowed, and then what do you use? 4, 6, 12. These are the 4, 6, 12, and 15 are allowed. And 4 is the only one that we actually have as a VLAN, right? So now I have an invalid. You know how we figure out if it's why it's an invalid? Oh, VLAN. VLAN 46. Yeah. It's easy to do, but the cool thing about it is that where this little caret is where the problem is. So all I had to do, since I forgot and couldn't read, I just go back to the amount, the length of the command that is valid, and then put a question mark, and it tells me what's supposed to go there. So I had to put the word VLAN.
So it always gives you a little caret right there?
It gives you a little caret. That's where the error is. That's where the error is.
Yeah, you see, you get it tied up in 6.
Yeah.
Hit control
So
6.
we have done that. We can say do show interface trunk, and when we go there, FA015 only allows VLAN 4 because we don't have the others. All the others have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 4. If we want to do that, you can remove them, but let's see, configure interface. We're still on interface, so we can do switchport trunk allowed VLAN all, and then we should be able to do the do show interface trunk, and excuse me, they're all back. So you have a lot of flexibility. A lot of flexibility there. For the recording, I set up one that we can use a router on a stick here. We've created, or we're going to create, 2 VLANs here. One with host A and host B on it. They're on the 192.168.1.65 with a 255.255.255.192 subnet mask. And host C is on the 192.168.1.130 with a 255.255.224 subnet mask. We haven't actually configured the access and the trunk ports here, so we can do that. Actually, we don't need a book to do that, do we? What he's going to do. So we can go in here and fast Ethernet. Let's see, config. Actually, he does tell me which one he wants to do. If we go to enable, it works better. So interface fast Ethernet 0 2-3, right? Is that the first two? 2 and 3. And you know why? You got to tell it it's a range. Says and there we go, 2 and 3. They didn't exactly put it there, but that's where the error was, because I couldn't have that as a range. I can't have a range as an individual. So we do a switch port mode access, right? And you'll see something cool. Switch port. We didn't make the VLAN yet, right? But I don't want to get out of this mode and then come back. And this one looks like it's on VLAN 2 because yeah, it is. Ports 2 and 3 are on VLAN 2. So let's access VLAN 2. It says VLAN 2 does not exist, but I made it for you. You did it for me. Creating VLAN 2. So the other one we were going to do, we want VLAN 10, right? VLAN 10, and we didn't name these. He didn't name these in the activities. VLAN 10. So do show VLAN, and we have VLAN 2 and VLAN 10, and on VLAN 2 or fast Ethernet 03. So now we can go back and go interface fast Ethernet 0/3 or 4, right? Switch port mode access, and Switchport access VLAN 10, because that's where we're going. That's where that one goes. Right? Now, what else do we need to do you think? Since we're going to want to send all the traffic up this one right here, we got to make this guy a switchport, or a trunk port. It's already a switchport. We're going to make it a trunk port. So that's fast Ethernet 0.1, right? So what we want to do is go to config T, interface fast Ethernet 0/1. And if we just did it the other, we would just say switchport mode trunk, right?
You got encapsulate things.
Yep. Well, this is one of those that, you know what? The only encapsulation protocol, and this is where it gets really weird. It's the only encapsulation protocol on that switch.
Okay.
So we don't have to specify. We could try that. We could try what? Switchport trunk. And it doesn't give me an encapsulation command. All it gives is allowed and native. Because .1Q is the only trunking protocol that's on that switch. Okay? So we ought to be in pretty good shape now. Nothing up here because, remember, on routers, by default, everything is down. Let's say no here, and we're not going to name it. We could name it if we wanted to. His. I'm not going to, in the book, he puts an IP address on the base network, interface fast Ethernet 0.1, and I think mine's going to be a fast Ethernet 0.0 because of the way the switches. You just got to go with what's there, obviously. He did that so that you could use that as your management subnet, so that you could put that on the switches on the VLAN 1 on the switches. The virtual interface there, and then they could talk to each other. You could manage them that way. Actually, let's show IP interface brief, and we can see that we only have, there it is. Oh, I couldn't find it there. Fast Ethernet 0.0, so that's the one we're going to have to do. So go to config T and interface fast Ethernet 0/0 dot, and for VLAN 2, let's just use the .2. We just created this guy. So the IP, well, actually let's do the encapsulation. You do have to specify encapsulation on a router. Encapsulation .1Q. Oh. You know why? Incomplete command. You know what's incomplete? Let's look, because we can say the question mark, and it says we have to tell it which VLAN this interface is associated with. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because the VLAN 2 traffic is going to go to the VLAN 2 interface. So this one is supposed to be VLAN 2, right? .1Q 2, not W. And now address 192.168.1.65.255.255.255.255, right? And then we should do a no shot. I always do a no shot whether it needs it or not. And now we want to go to interface fast Ethernet 0/0.10 because the other one was VLAN 10, right? Encapsulation .1Q. Ah, did it again, didn't I? And then we have to tell what VLAN is going to be on. And then we're going to do the IP address 192.168.1.255.255.255.254, is that right? No shut. But when we go up here, it's still red. Because you still have to give the no shutdown command to the physical interface. The physical interface is down. So if I go back to this guy and go to interface fast Ethernet 0/0, not dash, and do a no shut, everything's coming up now. We're green, it's amber here, we're waiting for spanning tree, it's checking for loops to see if there are any physical loops so that it can prevent bad things from happening. So as soon as that gets done, let's see if any of this works. 50 seconds, about 192.168. We can just see if it can ping its partner here. 67, that shouldn't be an issue, should it? It's on the switch. And the other one, its default gateway was 65, right? All right. And the other end was 1. What? Here's the other guy, 1.130. That's on the other network. Sometimes these things take a little while to get going. There we go. The simulator, and this is kind of like when we do the routers and the switches, you get the dot the first time, then looks good. It's got to do, remember, it's got to do ARP also. It's got to eventually get the hardware address. So, and this one would be the hardware address of the default gateway. Okay, not show. ARP-A. See, it's got the ARP address of the 60, or the MAC address of the 65 address and the 67 address. 65 address to send it to the default gateway. Does router on a stick make sense? VLANs make sense. Pause it.
Okay, what I want to do here is to try to set this thing up using a layer 3 switch, multi-layer switch. This is a 3560. What we have to do, and I'll try to keep the configurations over on the right. Let me move this over and drag this stuff over so that hopefully be able to see the configuration. So one of the first things that we need to do is to set these things up. VLAN 10 is going to be 192.168.10.0 network, and the VLAN 20 will be the 192.168.20 network. The in unit, the workstations already have IP addresses, and they're the .2 addresses, 192.168.10.2, and the other one's 192.168.20.2. The switch is, I've done a show run on this one. Go back up here, we have the Switchport access VLAN 10, so FA03, which is what this PC3 is connected to, is right now is an access port using the Switchport mode access. After and then we're going to add the VLAN to it so that we can get it on a VLAN. It's got to be an access port before we add it to a VLAN. If we go over here, we should have the same situation, fast Ethernet 03. What we want to do is to make on this one, switch 2, we want to make FA02 a trunk port. So let's see if we can do that. So we're going to interface fast Ethernet 0/2, and let's just look at this thing. Switchport, what, encapsulation? But there's no encapsulation. So that's because the 2960s only support 802.1q. So we're going to do Switchport mode trunk. And then when we do that, do show interface trunk, and we have it, and VLANs 1 and 20 are allowed on that trunk port because VLAN 20 is the only one that's on this switch. So if we go over here, and now on this one, let's drag this over here. On this one, FA01 is the one we want to be the trunk port. So we can go to interface, fast Ethernet 0/1, switch, port, mode, trunk, and we should be in business. Now, if you're using the Lambley book, this example is the 3560 on page 487, figure 11-16. He says some things that aren't necessarily going to happen. And then earlier in the book, he says that if you just plug the switches in, they will automatically negotiate. Not exactly the case, at least with Packet Tracer. And I think that they have actually changed that because automatically negotiating a trunk can be a dangerous thing. So let's show trunks here. We have trunk ports, but the VLANs the only ones that are allowed are 1. That's because we have trunk ports, but show VLAN, we don't have VLAN 10 and VLAN 20 yet. So let's make those guys. So VLAN 10. Well, I guess if I went into config mode, it would work better, huh? VLAN 10 and VLAN. We could obviously name these things, but we're not going to here. And we'll show VLAN. And now we have VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. The other thing that we have to do on a layer 3 switch, a multi-layer switch, is to turn on IP routing because it is a switch. It is not a router. Router's IP routing is on by default. I've had over the years one time when it didn't, it got loaded wrong or something got corrupted in the iOS, and the IP routing wasn't in the startup and the load up. But in this case, it's not in layer 3 switches. So we need to go there. So we'll go to config T and just turn on routing, IP routing. The next thing we need to do is to create a couple of virtual interfaces. These are just like when we did earlier when we created loopback addresses. These are not real physical interfaces, but they will work inside the layer 3 switch. So let's do interface VLAN 10, and let's do an IP address of 192.168.10.1.255.255.255.0. And let's go ahead and do it. Even though it said it was up, let's do the no shut anyway. And then let's go to interface VLAN 20, and let's make it VLAN change state to up. Let's make it an IP address of 192.168.20.1 with a 255.255.255.0 and use the no shut again just to be sure. Exit, and let's show IP interface brief. And when we go down to the bottom, we have VLAN 10 and VLAN 20, and they are both up. And show interface trunk, and 10 and 20 are now allowed on these things. Let's just show interface FA0/1 Switchport. Now, can't spell show. Show interface FA0/1 Switchport. And if you look at this thing, its trunking encapsulation is .1Q. Remember, these things were all set to auto. But when we made the other end on the 2960 a trunk port, an auto, a port configured for automatic will automatically negotiate a trunk, and it negotiated the encapsulation also. I guess that the next thing that we need to do is see if we can go from one to the other. So let's go to the command prompt here, and you see I've done a couple of things. We've done an IP config, actually done an IP config. Let's see if we can ping 192.168.10.1. And it works. And then we can try 20.1, just going across the network like we would if we were doing troubleshooting, and it works. And then we're going to go to 20.2, the big test. Can it get to the other network? And again, this thing may take a second. We'll see if it works here. We got a timeout, and now we're working. The simulator takes a little bit of time. Actually, real ones may take a little bit of time because it's got to go through, both ends have to go through the ARP process in order to get their hardware addresses. So, layer 3 switch, much simpler configuration than was the router on the stick. Both of them work with the trunk ports. Trunk ports carry all of the VLANs. Access ports can only have one VLAN on it, unless you're using voice. If you're using voice, then you can have two VLANs on it. And what really happens is you plug the phone into the network. The phone is actually a 2-port switch, and then you plug the workstation into the phone. So they get put on their correct VLANs. Okay, thanks for listening. I hope this has been useful.